Instead of seeing philosophical reflection as a threat to Athens, Socrates believes that he's performing a valuable public service. Why else indeed would the god have commanded him to do so if it was not important for the people of Athens to become aware of what they did not know? This involves exposing the hypocrisy of people who say that they care about truth or a good character, but in fact never really give much thought to such things. Socrates believes that he's helping his fellow Athenians to be more virtuous by forcing them to reflect on these kinds of philosophical issues. He says, quote, "I try to persuade you to give less priority and devote less zeal to the care of your bodies or to your money than to the care of your soul and trying to make it as good as it can be," end quote. Socrates adamantly rejects the charge that by doing this he is corrupting the youth. On the contrary, in his eyes, this kind of philosophical reflection is improving the youth. Somewhat remarkably, Socrates claims that if he is convicted and receives some hard sentence, this will ultimately be more to the detriment of the people of Athens than to him. To deprive Athens of the public service that he's performing would be a serious loss to them. He's in a sense conveying the gift of the god to his fellow citizens, and by this he presumably means philosophical reflection. He makes a famous simile of the city of Athens with that of a horse. He says, "Athens is like a big, noble horse, but one that's rather sleepy because of its size, all the time needing to be woken up by some kind of gadfly. This is the kind of role the god gave me when he attached me to the city, and the result is that there's never a moment when I'm not waking you up and cajoling and rebuking you, each one of you, the whole day long, settling on you wherever you may be." With this image, Socrates openly acknowledges that he's a pest to his fellow Athenians. But nonetheless, what he's doing is for their own good, even if they don't like it much. The simile implies that Athens is in danger of falling asleep, which means that it will simply go on blindly following old customs and traditions without ever calling them into question. Living life without any critical reflection is for Socrates like being asleep. Thus, it's necessary that people be awakened from their slumber, even if they would prefer to continue in it. Some of his auditors presumably thought that this part of his defense was self-aggrandizing, since it patronizingly suggested that he knew what was best for people, and he was helping them to see it. This element only gets worse when Socrates portrays himself as sacrificing his own interests in order to help the people of Athens in this way. He says, quote, "I've totally neglected my own affairs and put up with the neglect of what belongs to me for many years now, while always acting in your interest." This tone reaches its climax after Socrates has been found guilty and is given the opportunity to propose a different punishment from the death penalty, which his accusers have demanded. Since he's been performing such an important and valuable public service to the detriment of his own affairs, Socrates proposes that he be given free meals at the Prytaneum, where famous Olympian athletes or military heroes who have done great things for the state are fed at public expense. It's been suggested that this is a sign of Socrates' well-known irony, but in fact, it's entirely consistent with what he's previously said about his own understanding of his activity. To the men of the jury, it was doubtless perceived as a brazen insult. The whole point of giving the guilty party the opportunity to propose an alternative punishment was to provide the chance for him to accept the jury's decision and to show a degree of remorse and contrition. They expected that in order to avoid the death penalty, he would suggest some serious punishment, such as imprisonment or banishment from Athens. But by failing to play along and by proposing instead of a punishment, what is in effect a great reward, Socrates can be seen to be making a mockery of the proceedings.